Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, when you think of television, you often think of television entertainment, and there have been many classic programs throughout the years. Today, I'm honored to have a guest who's been behind some of the classic programs, especially the Waltons, Earl Hammer. Thank you very much for being here today.
Nice to be with you, Judy.
Of course, you're coming to Missouri Southern to talk about your experiences as a television writer and producer, and we're going to touch a little bit on that this half hour for people who are unable to make the presentation at Missouri Southern. But probably one of the first questions people might have is, how does someone get into Hollywood and television writing and producing? So maybe a little bit of background of what led you to television.
I was born in 1923 and almost immediately discovered I was a writer. I wrote a poem when I was 6 years old, which was published, and so I was an established writer. That led to a kind of attitude, I think, of being an observer and writing down my feelings, which blossomed in after World War II into a job in radio at NBC in New York, and from there I went into television, which brought me to Hollywood, which brings me up to the present day.
You mentioned you enjoyed writing. Did you enjoy reading as well as a youngster?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There were two books in my family. We were very poor. One was the Bible, and the other was the history of beekeeping, which came from somewhere. They're books you can put down. History of beekeeping was one. But I gradually discovered books in libraries, and today my house is overflowing with them.
Right. Well, we hear so much about the importance of children reading at an early age. You would be an example of that type of importance.
Well, I had the hunger for books without the books themselves. But you know, reading at an early age is certainly a wonderful thing, and I enjoyed reading to my children everything probably except green eggs and ham, because it would stay in your mind forever. And I have a sort of ability to remember like poems that I memorized when I was in high school, and reading a lot of that stuff, it stays in your mind, and I think also contributes to your capabilities as a writer to read aloud other stuff that other people have written. I know once I was trying to improve the level of my writing, and I took some passages from William Styron and typed them just to get into the mode of a great writer. It didn't work. It was so intimidating that I thought, oh, who am I to try to write after this kind of work?
So to be a successful writer, you have to develop your own style, what works best for you. How does one approach that?
I don't think I approached it consciously. I do have a style which I have discovered is a kind of adaptation of an Appalachian, in dialogue at least. I'm always offended when I hear people trying to approximate the way Hill people talk, and they say, why are you going now, Uncle so-and-so? You going up the hill to get some liquor in the still or something, which people don't talk like that. There's a wonderful writer named Elizabeth Maddox Roberts who won the Pulitzer Prize back in 1925, and she found a way of approximating Appalachian speech, which was, instead of walking, you know, you see it spelled W-A-L-K-I-N apostrophe, which is not the way it sounds, but it's, if you say walking, she could do the speech, and I shamelessly stole from her, and that became a part of my style. And I think a part of my style also is very simplistic sentence construction. Well, maybe not. I love Faulkner, and sometimes I get involved. I hear myself talking now and getting involved. But getting involved in lengthy sentences, but it's simply, I think, like every writer, there are things you want to tell, and they all come bursting out, and sometimes you lose your way and you wonder where you started, like as I am now.
So
where do we start this discussion?
Right. So you can have so many ideas, it's a matter of how do I present those ideas when it's time to sit down and write them and so forth. What about the difference? You said you did some work in radio before you started television. Writing for radio versus writing for television, or creating. Radio, obviously, everything's being heard, you're not seeing.
It was a wonderful experience, and I think an invaluable experience for any writer, because you're writing solely for the air, and you have to supply a total experience to the air. I loved writing for radio. I used to do a show called NBC Theater, where we would adapt the stage plays for radio. And in those days, this was in 1950 in New York, and there were all these wonderful actresses and actors around, and we got to use them all, and did plays by Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller, really first-rate stuff. Again, which contributes to your own experience as a writer and to your growth as a writer. So my career has been a steady growth and rich and an enriching experience. Not that it's all that rich, but whatever it is, it has been contributed to by a good many influences and by a good many very generous people who've helped me along the way.
So your experiences in radio helped lay the foundation for transitioning to television writing.
It was absolutely, because I was working as a radio writer at NBC in the 50s when television came along. And I made the transition from radio into television. And in that day, television was, it was the golden age of television, where we had shows like the Philco Theater, and the show that I did was Theater Guild on the Air, which was sponsored by the United States Steel Hour. And these were 2-hour or hour-long dramas, which were done live and by people with not a great deal of experience in television. They were people usually who had more experience in stage work. And we were all feeling our way along and having a wonderful time and doing remarkable things. There were directors who later, like Marty Manulis, who did the show Marty. I mean, Fielder Cook, who produced Marty. Rod Serling, who later came on to do the Twilight Zone. One of his great shows was the one about boxing. I've forgotten the title. Another one about a Nazi summer prisoner called, shucks, my senior moments are catching up, but you get the idea. It was a wonderful time of development and exploration.
And working on something like The Twilight Zone, which is still seen in reruns now as one of the classics of television of its time.
Yes,
and,
yes.
It was doing things that had never been done before on
Indeed,
visual media.
indeed. And also great fun. I did, I think, as the number 3 writer, who in a number of episodes that you did on The Twilight Zone. And it was great fun to work with Rod Serling, who was a interesting, sort of pugnacious, short man who levitated a lot. And I'd take him a script and he would say, "What do you want to do next?" Which was sort of a departure in Hollywood, because usually you have to sell the story to the network, and then the network decides if the sponsor's going to like it, and then they give the production company a go-ahead. But Rod would just say, "What do you want to do next?" And I probably some of the most satisfactory stories I've ever done on The Twilight Zone. And also, it's very good for the ego, because today when young people discover that I did some of the original Twilight Zones, they give me a hi there. It's awfully nice.
So playing a key role in that development of that series, which had a lot of success, was
Indeed.
very satisfying.
Yeah.
And of course, you're here at Missouri Southern talking about your experience with the Waltons.
Yes.
And you mentioned your background. How much does your personal experience and your background play a role in the creation of the Waltons and what developed as a
Well, it's a
television
very
show?
strong influence. The show is based very directly on my own family. I was the oldest of 8 children. We were born, my father and mother were very poor people who lived in the Blue Ridge and we grew up during the Depression. I was born in 1923, if you can imagine anybody being that old. And we lived that life. My father was something of a scoundrel. My mother was a very religious lady. We all had red hair. We had a grandpa and grandpa like they did. There were real people who inspired those. If you ever saw the show, there were 2 ladies who were bootleggers. They weren't quite so elegant in real life. They served their liquor. It was an apple brandy. It was pretty good. They served it in tin dippers. But I thought for Hollywood, we better change the service to silver goblets.
Had to polish it a little bit.
Oh, yes. Romanticize it a little bit. And we were a close family, and a good family, Baptist, and very self-reliant, and good people. Kind of people you got here.
Right. So you had the concept for the Waltons. For the audience, as you mentioned earlier, there is a lot involved in the steps that it takes to come up with a concept and write it and have a network accept it. What about the process that it took the Waltons from your original creation to when it finally made it on?
Well, it started as a book called A Homecoming, and I would like very much to say that someone who is associated with the university was very influential in the fact that the book got made into a television station. A member of your faculty is Joanne Bruff, and Joanne discovered the book at CBS and passed it on with a recommendation that it be made into a Christmas special. So that impetus got it going. And then the Christmas special itself with Patricia Neal and Richard Thomas and those children was very successful. So the chairman of the board of CBS, Mr. Paley, suggested that we try it as a television series. And it didn't get hardly any ratings. It was way down the bottom of the ratings. But somehow people began to watch it, began to tell their friends to watch it. And it started in September, and by January of that year, it was the #1 show on the air. Against competition, Flip Wilson, the comedian, who was wonderful, and a violent show called Mod Squad, but we blew them away. You know,
so it just took a little bit of patience from the
family from the hills out there in Hollywood, as if they knew what they were doing.
So it was the first time someone had approached a program like that, where you're showing kind of the real life episodes, what people dealt with.
Exactly. Well, we did deal with very real situations. There was a very caustic, cynical group, New York and Los Angeles critics, who said, you know, what does CBS have in mind? I mean, these are dirt poor people living in the backwoods of Virginia during the Depression. Where's the sex? Where's the violence? Why is anybody going to watch this show? But people did, and they're still watching it, you know, all over the world.
Did you find that a lot of people would react to you, especially people who lived through that same time period, the Depression and the war, that I can relate to the stories you're telling us?
Oh, very much so, yes. But what is very satisfying to me is that there's a whole new generation of people discovering the show. And a lot of younger people will say, I didn't understand why Mom and Dad were so crazy about it, but now I'm beginning to like it. Because I think it has, and this sounds so self-serving, but I will say it anyway, I think it has a kind of universal message about humanity and failings and ability and sacrifice and all those things that we admire when we overcome difficulties, challenges.
Do you feel that the show, perhaps with the younger generation seeing it now, maybe for the first time, it's increasing their understanding of what their parents or grandparents may have gone through?
Oh, absolutely. And not only recognizing it, but appreciating it a little bit more, what our parents have done. It was a difficult generation. All generations are difficult.
Right.
Really.
When you look at the generation that went through not only Depression but a world war and a lot of influence,
absolutely,
how it may affect them. When you look at the characters of the program, and you had a family which had, you know, typical, I guess we could say, family structure with parents and the children and so forth. Did you feel that that really helped with the nucleus of having that consistent family in the show from week to week?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And each of the characters was very well developed. They had distinctive personalities, and one of the advantages was that in the audience, everybody could find somebody to identify with, from the youngest, the little girl who played Elizabeth, Cammie Cotler, was only 6 when we started, and she was 17 when we did the last episode of the series. But a big family was a prohibition in many ways, because the network kept saying, well, we're spending so much money on cast, we don't have anything left for sets. But we overcame things like that. But it was a remarkable group of actors.
Did the actors themselves become a family working on a program like that for so long? And there has to be some chemistry, I would imagine, between the people who work together.
They really did. It's kind of a cliche in Hollywood that any production company will say, oh, we're just like a family. You know, they may be cutting each other's throats and trying to outbid each other for salary off camera, but they all say, oh, we were a family. But in our case, it really was true. And I think it was because they were playing members of a family. And and they grew into those roles. I know Ellen Corby, who played the grandmother, was forever grabbing one of the children and saying, "If you run over that cable again, I'm going to kill you." Or one of the little boys saying, "You use that kind of language again, and I'm going to spank you." And the children, I think, developed sort of maternal and paternal feelings for the mother and father actors. I know that when it looked as if we were going to wind up the series, Ralph Waite, who played the father, and Michael Learned, who played the mother, became very concerned about what was going to happen to the children after they were no longer a family. And they took the kids aside and helped them cope with it. But they've stayed close, and we're all still good friends.
And I imagine that is a big transition, especially for someone who has been an actor or an actress in a program like that for so long. And eventually they come to an end.
Yes, and just that one show. I mean, a lot of those children actors play in many different roles, but this was a very secure, recognizable, and strong unit, and they had to learn to do without it.
Yeah. Now, behind the scenes, of course, we have the producers and the writers, and people who watch on television see a lot of names on the end of credits for a program. John Q. Public watching at home doesn't really realize sometimes all the teamwork it takes to produce a program like that.
It's remarkable that one of them gets done anyway. You really need a city. I know at Warner Brothers, where I've spent most of my time, they have paint shops, carpenter shops, electrical shops, and all of those skills and makeup, casting, all of those things are extremely important to the production. And each person may not work more than once in an hour, but suddenly you need to call someone from makeup needs to come and fix somebody's makeup, or the hair person has to come. There are an army of people seeming just to stand around, but actually they have very highly developed skills and very valuable skills, which you call upon when you need it.
And so you really have to have that teamwork attitude.
It's sort of like worker bees around, the worker tending the actors. What a life. Isn't that a strange way to live?
What is it like for someone on a production like that, for the audience point of view? They see the program being filmed and bits and pieces here, but they don't see the total production perhaps until it's finished.
Yeah, it's just as well. I think it would destroy the illusion of that wonderful word, verisimilitude. It would be hard to believe it.
Now, you mentioned the program still being seen today, and it's being seen around the world as well. It's not just limited to the United States. Do you feel that the program has had a lot of international influence on television programming as well?
I'm not sure. I know that the people I have met who have seen the show, I don't know how much influence it has. I don't know if there's a Chinese Waltons or Romanian Waltons, but I do know that people abroad have enjoyed it. We were in Vienna once, and I was interviewed by a Viennese journalist who said that he was trying to discover why the kids in Vienna loved the show. And one of the questions he asked them was, where do you think Walton's Mountain is? And they all said, in the Vienna woods.
They wanted it in their home country.
Another time, my wife and I were in the Mediterranean, and we were off the coast of Greece, and someone knew that I had done the show, and they came running in and said, "You want to hear Grandma Walton speaking Greek?" And so we went to the lounge, and sure enough, there was Ellen Corby, who had been translated into Greek. It's very gratifying to know that something that I wrote, I didn't write every episode, but something that I supervised or was so intimately connected with has at least, I don't know how the influence it's had on people's lives, but at least it has touched people's lives, and I know that it hasn't done them any harm.
So the storylines are universal storylines. The struggles the family on Walton Mountain dealt with are things that a family in Romania could deal with. Yes.
And also I don't think it guided them in any way, unless it was to say we can solve our problems. We are responsible people. There's nothing wrong with being decent and upstanding and trying to make good lives for ourselves.
Good.
I'm sorry, but my voice is...
No problem, I can understand. When we look at the programming and what the impact of media from the United States playing on the world, do you find that sometimes people overseas see that and think that's the way life is in the United States, that it has that stereotype when they see American television programming?
I don't know. I wouldn't mind if they find that is at least typical of one aspect of American life. I was telling someone yesterday that one of my early books was Spencer's Mountain, and Kennedy chose it as one of the books representative of American life to present to 100 heads of states around the world, which I thought was a lovely thing to happen. And now whenever my wife and I are in London, I will nudge her if we go past Buckingham Palace and say, I wonder if she's read it yet.
She has a copy in her desk.
She hasn't written me a fan letter, let's face it.
It's important to capture the good aspects of America, American families, American life, and be able to carry that through. Do you feel that television has undergone radical changes over the years? Television programming today, some people say there's nothing like what it was in the years when the Waltons was airing. Waltons were airing.
Well, I went, say, my career has covered over 50 years in the industry, and it spanned from the golden years to, I don't know what to call these years. There's still some good stuff, and I suppose that's the way we ought to look at television, as take what good we can from it. I'm sometimes shocked by the language and by the vulgarity, but I'm kind of prudish, really.
Is there a lot more choice now on television? I mean, you have more than 3 networks.
There's something for everybody, and it's just that I was talking with a parent yesterday, and people say that you should watch with your children, and he not only watched with his children, he focuses the entertainment, he interprets it for them, until the point I think will come when they themselves can make their own judgments. But at least he doesn't just throw them out there. Although I think that happens to a lot of kids who are just left with the television set as a babysitter, and then they tune in something, and God knows what happens when they see some of the stuff.
Some parents may say, well, there's nothing, quote, good for my child to watch on TV today.
I had an insulting thing said to me once. I was interviewed, I was interviewing, it was a daughter of Herbert Hoover Jr.'s wife, and I wanted to ask her a question about Mr. Hoover. I was working on a thing in New York, and I phoned her and said that it was a television thing, and she said, oh, isn't that the thing that children watch?
Oh, no.
And I'd like to tell her today that, yeah, even grown-up children don't watch it.
What about the research aspect involved in writing in the episodes? You were very historically correct in what was happening in the time period being portrayed in the Waltons. Did a lot of research go into that?
Well, I lived some of that.
Right.
But there were other things that, there were some episodes that I did not, that were not based on truth. Like John Boy was presented as having been at the burning of the Hindenburg. I hadn't been 13 miles from home by that time. but we did do research, and you know, I would hire writers to do the scripts, and I did a lot of them myself, but I supervised the writing on each one, so that the veracity of much of it was I could handle. It was that funny. Most of these actors, none of them were Baptist, and I don't think any of them had ever been to church in their lives. But yet I loved Baptist hymns, and we would put Baptist hymns in the church things. None of them knew how to sing them, so somebody would call me from the set and say, "You better come down here." So I would find myself at the set singing all these stubborn actors, teaching these stubborn actors how to sing "Throw Out the Lifeline."
So your role expanded into a songwriter as well. Never know what you'll be called upon to do at the time.
Well, it was a challenge.
So, current projects, you mentioned that you've been in the business for 50 or so years. What are you currently working on?
I've got more things than a 77-year-old man should have. I have a book that's out at the moment from Hawk Press in Tulsa called Murder in Tinseltown, which is everything that the Waltons isn't. And I have a book on the stands at the moment called The Avocado Drive Zoo, which is about the family that my wife and I have made together. I have a play being produced this winter, and I'm working on a book of poems, and I garden, and and I'd come to Joplin and have a good time.
So no real retirement. It was very active.
No time for that.
Well, I know while you're on the campus at Missouri Southern, you may have a chance to meet students and who are perhaps aspiring writers who would like to make it to Hollywood someday.
Yeah.
Any words of advice for someone who might fall into that category? If they want to someday maybe be in your shoes and say, I've had a successful career.
I would say don't come to Hollywood. I would say stay home, whether you're an actor or a writer or a director, and plow the farm at home. Celebrate what is here. Because when you go to Hollywood, so few people get into I was very lucky. Most of the young people who come there become valets, car jockeys, waiters and waitresses. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they don't attain their ambition. Or else by attaining it, the cost is too high. I would love to see more people stay in the regions that they were born in cultures that they know, and interpret those cultures for the rest of the world. Write books and plays and short stories about your grandpa, the places you should know, because basically where you live is a place that you care about greatly, and if you care that much, your passion will be conveyed into the work. So stay home.
Stay home and succeed at home. Do you feel that there are more opportunities now at home, by staying home, that there are more things that people can do in the
Absolutely.
past? They had to go to Hollywood, but now there's more opportunities.
Absolutely. Or you can create those opportunities. You can. Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, for heaven's sakes, used to say, "Let's put on a play." I mean, that's the approach. Put on a play. Write a play, a book.
So just take that first step and do it in your own home turf. So.
I mean, that should not discourage people whose ambition is so great that they absolutely have to play the Broadway stage or be the MGM first star. It's just that the cost is so great and the opportunities are not always there. But if somebody has that huge an ambition and that big a talent and that willingness to suffer to get to that point, then they should by all means try it. But I would say stay home.
Stay home. There's a lot of competition. Right. Well, as you're looking at the opportunity to speak to Missouri Southern audience tonight, is there any one key point you'd like to leave as a thought for people as they hear what you have to say about your experiences and putting together the Waltons in that time period?
I can't think of a thing. We just continue watching the show, The Waltons, and sample some of the other things that I have done, like Charlotte's Web. I love that, and I don't know. Just it's very nice to be here. I hope they will remember that I came and went and had a good time.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to visit with me today while you're here.
Thank you.
Joplin.
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much. I'd like to also thank the audience for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on the station. We'll see you then.